Today's timing belt on this 240 in secret because I'm not allowed to work here. But as long as I keep it down, no one's gonna hurt her. All right, this is the valve cover's off. The camshaft is out because I'm investigating a noise in the rear. And we'll get to that in a minute. But to remove the timing belt, pretty straightforward. I got a whole video on it, and especially with this nice clean example of a 240. This is Sarah's 92 wagon, and it's not so bad. Pulling the cam is done after the timing belt comes out, which is removing the fan clutch with the 4 bolts on it on the back side and little nuts, and then the pulleys. You can see that the bolts here were rounded pretty good. I took some file to them to try to get them back straight, but oof, that could have been a disaster. And I've already got the new tensioner ready to go. It's preloaded. Okay, had that shoot into my hip earlier trying to get it in. Ouch. That's gonna bruise. The valve cover itself was showing signs of leaking. The bolts were pretty soaked and just lots of wetness, which is causing a pretty big leak for Sarah. And we don't want that, so that's one of the issues that I'm taking care of. So the covers then come off, and then the pulley and everything. So yeah, this is all the parts for Bruce. There's Bruce and Genevieve. These are the camshaft bearing caps. What you want to do is look for any uneven wear. And if it looks like there is weird wear in there, feel for it with your finger. This is the plug at the back of the head. These leak a lot, as you can see. Pretty wet on the bottom side. Looked like it was on its way out. I've seen them pop out entirely, and those do sit here at the back, so they actually will get some oil through the bearing journals. So there you go. It's not a huge leak sometimes, or it could be, especially if you need to clean your flame trap, and I'll get to that in a minute. So these are the lifters. Doesn't seem like there's a hydraulic adjustment. And then this is the shim that goes on the top of it. And the shim, that's the side that goes down into the hole. And it's going to be nice and oiled everywhere. So I'll make sure to use some assembly lube to make a good, smooth start on this engine. What I'm suspecting first, as the noise, the rattle coming from the rear of the cam, was either infrequent oil changes, a worn cam lobe, a broken spring, or perhaps a really bad valve silencer. These are rubber pieces. I'll show you how I remove them on the other ones. But these pieces here do sit inside at the top of the spring, and they just help take up a little bit of the slop that is in the cam. And I'll show you the marks that as the cam's rotating, it has a moment where once these are worn out and flat like that and crispy, it just slaps a little bit more. It doesn't seem to be awful, but it does help to quiet down your valve train. From the front, we'll look at our bearing surfaces. I wish I had a micrometer so I could actually check the lobes on these. I feel like I'm not doing it right, but then again, working in secret, don't have all my tools. I've practically emptied that box because half the stuff's in another state right now. This is a spot where the cam makes no contact with the valve lifters. I guess we'll call them that. All of these guys, as the cam's rotating, let's say that it's parked maybe like right here. Look at that. From here, there's a contact, and then right there's some contact. There's a gap there, and it goes back to contact on the lobe. So it looks like it's high pressure, perhaps 0 pressure, or no pressure from, not even touching. It's just a millimeter or a fraction of a millimeter of clearance. And then bam, right to the top of the cam. Okay, so that's where some of the noise will be generated. If that wasn't a good indicator, let's compare number 8. Look at that. It seems like there's almost no contact on the whole bottom side of the cam. And then it makes a little bit there, skips a bit, and then bam, to the tippity-toppity. In comparison here, our friend, the other side, seems like there's some contact directly on the opposite side of the apex of the lobe. So I need to figure out what's causing this to not touch, and I don't want to pull the head off. I really don't. She runs okay. Oil can sit inside of here, and it gets pretty sludgy. So that's, look at that. That's a spot where my little piece of my plastic from the silencers has fallen. Okay. And as we're looking down into the holes, you want to inspect for debris. And it didn't look like this was a broken spring. I can't confirm if it's a sagging spring without pulling the head to actually test it. It would be very difficult to do that. Yeah, everything's looking okay so far. Now what I'm gonna do is show you how I remove this. I just take a nice little pick and I start to spin it. And I want it to spin because I don't want it to break up into pieces. And then I lift it up. If we're lucky, it's a perfectly easy removal like that. If we're unlucky, it'll snag a little bit on the bottom. It then breaks into a couple of pieces, which could make it a little more difficult for me. Nope. Yeah, that one got a little caught, but okay. Looks like we made it. Oof, what's in here? What are you doing in there? Oh my goodness. Do I even want to know? I'm gonna have to investigate that. All right, that's gonna be a pretty good reminder to just take a look at all of the galleys and make sure it's nice and clear. As disturbed as I am by that discovery, I'm quite pleased with the ease that I had getting it out. I'm not using much pressure here, just enough to glide over and see if I feel resistance, and there is a little bit, so looks like that did cause some wear on the cam surface. And a little bit on number 5 back there, the last cap. Okay. What we want to avoid is getting those pieces of plastic down here where it'll be really difficult to get to extracting them. Good news is they do break apart and just dissolve into the oil, but we don't want any obstructions should they come up in big chunks. For the timing belt kits, I had to order an extra camshaft seal because as one comes for the head, none come for the timing belt kit, and then this is used for the intermediate shaft as well. Today I noticed that the motor mounts are larger, one side to the other. I don't know which one's which, but we'll figure that out. Here's the side profile view of our silencers. You see the flare on them. That's the side that's going to go up. It looks like they have a nice little ridge at the bottom. Very finely machined and shaped to fit in there and essentially just cushion the blow. So that's what we'll do now. And the water pump. While the water pump, the timing belt kit that came out of the car seems to be in really good shape, the water pump will be replaced as just general preventative maintenance. We were unsure if the car was overheating. You know, it looks so good down there, but it is a little squeaky. Well, I hope some of this information and this little insight has been useful. We're going to go back to time lapses as I continue to install the belts, the seals, and putting everything back with my fingers crossed that this car stops leaking. And then I'll get on to changing the motor mounts. I took to the internet and then the Haynes repair manual, just checking on some of the specifications here, and it looks like the valve stems, the oil clearance, which is the shim to the cam follower, 0.0004 to 0.0025, 25 thousandths of an inch. The service limit is 4 thousandths, or 40 thousandths, I guess would be the way to say that. Don't have a feeler gauge right now. Gonna go out tomorrow morning because I was sent the wrong front main seal, and yay. Let's just move on and I'll put together as much as I can. I've been in this garage for 24 hours. Starting to feel like a cave goblin, but I'm gonna give you an update on what's good besides the flickering of the fan. That looks really cool. It's just the ceiling fan. We've got the water pump in, and the front timing seal has been removed. It's chilling right there on the floor. And you see the intermediate shaft, which mainly drives the distributor. Down at the bottom, we had a clean separation of the oil pan gasket from the front timing seal, which is good news for me, because that means I can attempt to seal it up with a good cleaning and then some RTV. That's that. The water pump, you put the 2 nuts on first and then sort of pull it all the way up. Don't forget to use silicone grease on the O-rings. Helps them to mate. And also the wiring harness, as you see, it's disconnected down there. That's for the alternator, because I needed access to get the timing cover off without having to wiggle it around the harness, as it's clamped in 4 different places. And quickly it became a big job. But at least the top is back on, the valve cover's on. I'm not going to be messing with shims or anything like that. Catch you up when it's all put back together and see how she runs. All right, it's a couple hours later. The timing belt's all put back together, and the heavy guns are here. That's the big jack and some extra tools, because it's time to work on the struts. I'll turn the engine on so you can see just how bad those motor mounts are too, because they're on my list. From there, I'll close the door and we'll get right to getting the struts off. I'm expecting it's going to be about a 2-hour job to do both sides. We'll see what the ball joints look like as well, but pretty straightforward. too much wobble. No thanks. Two major points. Three, I hate doing this job on these cars. Wow, that's the heaviest strut assembly I've ever dealt with, and it's the only one where I have to remove the brake caliper entirely. Great. And we're gonna bleed the brakes because, well, you can see it's open the line. Furthermore, it needs brake pads. Great. This guy who sold the car, I tell you what, he talked it up and a half, and it just was not that. But it's gonna be that pretty shortly, at my expense. This isn't even my car. What am I doing? It took me an hour and 12 minutes to get that side. Let's see if this one can be any quicker. My jack is slowly dropping the engine, so I'm gonna be quick, but here's the difference between the old mount and the new mount. Real spongy, real swollen and soft, and that one looks like it's made out of concrete. And here's the driver's side. You have to remove the whole thing. It's not so bad. You still get the 3 bolts from the bottom under the cross member. And then to access those 3, pull off this boot, pull off the hose for the idle air control motor, go down under these hoses, and you see this bracket? That's the bracket that's attached to the intake manifold. You see top bolt, bottom bolt, and then number 3 is down here somewhere. Little 1/4-inch ratchet with a 12mm deep socket. Let's put her back together, and then we'll get to bleed the brakes, put on new brake pads. Sarah brought me pizza. Woo! Yeah, here, let me just show the people what we're up to. This was much more difficult when I was a teenager in the driveway with hand tools, but now I'm an adult with an arsenal. How dirty do I look? So good news, Sarah. These are what your shocks look like. Doesn't sound very good. It's okay that they compress it this amount, but they should spring up, and well, they don't. I'm gonna put it up to the microphone and see if we can hear how the bearing sounds. It's not great. These are Volvo brand. I don't know if they're original, but your shocks are cheapo brands. They're Sensen, Sachs, Super Touring. Sachs is actually okay. BMW, I think, used a lot of Sachs. VP Auto Parts ones were labeled Pro Parts Sweden, so we're keeping it in the family.
Oh, it's good. They absolutely come through every time I need them.
If my car breaks down, I can count on Car Shield to cover it.
I wonder if I look as awful as I feel? Got a couple hours of sleep because on the way home last night, this car decided to thank me with 2 new problems. We have an alternator that quit. Hopefully it's just wiring, but the battery died, and when you turn the lights off, you get a little more juice to run the fuel injection system. But it died while basically driving. Managed to limp it back here, thankfully. And the second thing is a big oil leak. I'll show you in a minute, but I peeled forward the covers for the timing belt, and the camshaft seal is the one that has an awful flip out kink in it or something like that. Looks like it just started leaking out because the water pump got pretty covered in oil, and it was hitting the headers and the side of the alternator. Speaking of the alternator, there's, the signal wire, there's the red power wire, and then there's the ground, which is that kind of bluish wire. Let's see if you can spot it back there. It's not uncommon for those to break, so I'm gonna just confirm that it's all attached, and yeah, that should be good. Worst case scenario, the alternator might have had a problem with water in it from draining the cooling system. I don't think so, because I covered it nicely and we didn't run it wet. I'm gonna look back on this time in my 20s and just be like, man, glad I'm out of that. But right now, we're kind of just in the thick of it. And, you know, to quote or misquote Winston Churchill, when you're going through hell, just keep on going. At least it's pretty in red. Got the timing belt suspended, because I don't want to have to undo all of it. We'll see if we can do this, otherwise I'll have to undo all of it. Okay, camster looks fine up top. Check out underneath. Ruh-roh. That much of the seal is pushed out and leaking. All this work for a little thing like that. Is that sad or what? It's so funny that it was right at the spot that I couldn't see it. The spring is out because I removed it when I was extracting the seal. I remember reading that you can, you're encouraged to put the seals in at a depth of like 4 to 7 millimeters or something, or 5 to 7 millimeters, which means there's about a 2 millimeter difference between where the old seal was and the new one should be. And the depth is important because this rubber, you know, it's not as hard as the metal, but it will eventually wear a slight groove into those, and it could result in a seal that does not hold well, and oil can still seep through here. That was actually in the book on the section for the crankshaft. But the camshaft, well, here's hoping. Yeah, not a bad job if the fan clutch doesn't give you much trouble, because I've had it on and off several times now. And hopefully the timing mark stayed put. We'll see as I rotate all the way around and then try to fire up. But I do also, let's find out what happened with the alternator there. Okay, good news. I found the problem. The ground cable was not reconnected. That is attached. There it is. It was attached to a clamp, and the clamp held the wire for the charge. And it looks like I got the clamp on, but I didn't get this. So, yay. Let's see how this shaking is now with the new engine mounts. And I'm going to confirm if my timing marks are aligned, as they seem to be when I was rotating, but I still got to double check with that. Then I'll hook up the fan, since that's the extra step. Those engine mounts should appear a lot more stable now. Have another road test, make sure everything's okie doke, and then I get to go home and sleep. And done. She runs A-okay. No more oil leaks, the battery's charging. We're back in business, folks. That's a wrap on this. Pretty rough couple of days, but you know, I feel pretty good today, because getting that cam seal without removing the pulley on the bottom and keeping everything in time, it just seemed to work out nicely. So today was an easy day, which helped to make up for the prior 2 days. Thanks for watching. And yes, this was not a step-by-step DIY, but I sure hope you got a little entertainment and perhaps some healthy reminders, like if you get an extra cam seal from the order being a little incorrect, then count yourself lucky, because you may just need it. Always order extra parts, especially at like $2.60 on Rock Auto, as these individual seals can cost. It's well worth it for these minor headaches. And while a car like this does at times have me going, oh, I should have not bought a 240, because, well, this one, while this isn't my car, you know, I've got old Beluga, I do have to remind myself that the jobs are easier no matter what. The motor mounts are pretty straightforward, maybe 30 minutes for each one, and the cam seal, an hour of work up top, you know, with everything being nice and loose from the last couple of days of work. So I can't complain too much. She is what she is, an old Volvo that has a reputation for getting you there, but boy, oh boy, when things start to go wrong, I do get a little fatalistic. So a good nap, a good shave, everything's okay. The world can go on again. Now, rant is over. See you next time. Needs more charge. We have to buy a new one. And on top of that, it's almost insult to injury, but I get it. You have to replace the front pulley with your own, and thankfully I have the tools for it, but it's just all these extra little steps. It's becoming a bear of a job. Good news is the castings and even down to the hardware between the two alternators Looks pretty much the same. The only thing is the stuff that says Bosch on the original one has a sticker and it's not embossed, so who's to say? This could be an OE equivalent, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, nobody could test it. They're just saying that their leads are broken or the machine's down. So forgetting everything that I said about this car, we're now on day 4. And yay. Here's what we know about the charging system. The alternator that we pulled out may have well been good, but nobody could test it, so we had to buy a new one. And then the first thing you want to check for is that you have the battery light turning on at the dash. We don't. The battery light does not turn on at the dash, which means the circuit that excites the alternator, that triggers it to start charging, is not working. Also known as the amp light on older cars. So what I need to do there is diagnose the route and make sure that it is actually something that will get power. Either the bulb is burned out or the wire that goes to the alternator is broken, and it could also just be a false reading because we have a low battery. But when I turn the key on, I hear the pump go, I see all the warning lights turn on the dash except for the oil pressure light and the battery light. Now those two are both attached to the same harness that I had to disconnect to get the timing belt changed. And those wires, it's the small red wire to the alternator, which is the spade terminal, and then the round pole, I think, that goes to the oil pressure switch, which is right there, the black wire, okay? And then there's the fat red wire for the charging, which goes right to the battery. Now those guys go all the way up, the two small wires, they go all the way up to the round connector, I believe, at the firewall, which also runs a temperature sensor, like that connector there. It's not round, it's rectangle, where the junction is. So they kind of route from there down here. Now, everything avoids the exhaust manifold for good reason, but it still gets pretty hot at the bottom of the engine. The wires can get crispy. And it's just to the right of the ABS light, which is 2 over from the check engine light. That's where we should be seeing the one light for the battery, but it's not there. Maybe I burned some bulbs out. Maybe I broke some wires. Let's find out. All right, I got the multimeter. My plan of attack was to pin everything out. I took this apart here, and this left side goes down into the accessories, and then the right side goes into the main harness back in through there. We have 4 wires that are on it. One yellow has a blue stripe, one does not. Then there's the red and black wire. The red wires for the alternator exciter, the black wire for the oil pressure sensor. The yellow wires are 2 coolant temperature sensors. One of them controls mixture and the other one is for the gauge, I think. I know one of them is for the gauge. I guess I can't confirm the other one. So anyway, long story longer, I traced the wiring. Well, I got open circuits on both the red and black, and I was like, oh, interesting if both wires would break from something that I did. But then again, like I said, that wiring harness is brittle down there, but stubborn old me went, let me go look at the cluster, because like it said online, if you have the battery light at the dashboard, it should be working. And I tried a couple of things. I tried grounding the wires here, but none of the lights came on the cluster, but they're also behaving a little weird there. So I pulled the cluster out, found out that the airbag light's missing. That's another thing for another time. Found out you can't replace the bulbs in the sockets. You have to get a new socket. Great. All that stuff. And then I started going back down under here because, you know, as I was taught, you do the easy things first, and then you go into the more harder stuff. So more harder. Good English. And yes, I started pulling these down because it was a little tricky. There's a clamp at the back of the alternator, and then there's a clamp bolt there. There's a clamp bolt there. So we're 3 clamps in, and what do you know? The harness is broken at the other bolt there. Huh. Let's take a closer look. I don't know exactly why it had to be this side, but up in there, the 2 wires, the red and the black for the exciter. Also the battery cable, or the alternator charging cable, does not look great. So it got chewed up by something, and I don't know what it is, but that's the solution. We just got to repair the wiring. Too bad we already replaced the alternator. Whoops. Hokey smoky, we're all buttoned up. Let's see if the key turns on and the lights for the battery come up and the oil pressure. Look at that. Interesting. Before, what it was doing is immediately after turning the key, everything shut off except for check engine and parking brake. But now everything stays lit, including the bulb failure light. The only light bulb that's not working is the SRS bulb. Well, I learned a few things today. You need to replace the bulb and socket as one piece. And check wiring. Sometimes just things get brittle. Something cut into it though. I don't know what it was, but I guess I was the final force that broke it. All right, 4 days later. What we should see with the key, you having some trouble?
No.
What we should see now is with the engine turned on, the battery light will stop. Those will turn off. All the lights should actually turn off, but the battery light will turn off. The oil pressure light will be, a second or two for oil pressure to build up since we removed the filter. Parking brake light will stay on. The bulb failure light should be off until we turn the headlights on because you might have a bulb out. Here we go. Oh, she's sad. Stand by. Okay. All right. Try it now. And oil pressure is off. Great. We're charging. We got everything going like it should. Sarah, you're ready to rock and roll. By the way, I need to borrow your car for a couple days, so see ya. Even when you're loaded up and you don't know what to do with this little corner? Bada boom. Volvo's thought of everything.